Probably the most challenging time period in the book of Revelation would have to be the dead bodies laying in the street for 3.5 days. We need to get our head around, first of all, verse 8, and find out who or what is the great city. Why is it called spiritually Sodom and Egypt? Why is it said that this great city was where our Lord was crucified? And we need to identify the street in this great city. So in this one verse there is packed a lot of information. The great city is no doubt clearly Rome. We have these three quotations: Revelation 14 verse 8, Revelation 16 verse 19, and Revelation 17 verse 18. Let's just turn back one of those references in Revelation 17 verse 18, clearly establishing that this great city is Rome. That brings a problem. What's Rome got to do with Paris or France? Well, we'll see how this pans out in a moment. Now, Revelation chapter 17 and verse 18. John, of course, saw the great whore or the harlot sitting upon the scarlet-coloured beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. He didn't know what it was. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I was astonished. That's as it is in the Greek. I did not know what this was. This great woman with a golden cup, with a name stamped in her head, Mystery, Babylon the Great, Mother of Harlots. And the angel said in verse 9, here is the mind which hath wisdom. And then gives John political and geographical evidence to show who the beast was and who the woman was. However, it culminates in verse 18, where simply the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So it's Rome. So when we have a look at Revelation chapter 11 and verse 8, this great city is Rome. Now, the problem is we've got a street in Rome. Now, the street, as we'll see in a moment, is France. But this quotation that we've taken from the emperor, the pagan Roman emperor Caracalla, who was one of the emperors, in fact, he was the first emperor of the third seal in Revelation 6. And the third seal in Revelation chapter 6 was the black horse. And the black horse in the pagan Roman Empire was particularly and peculiarly singled out for taxation. The balances in the black horse, the Roman Empire, the badge of the rider of the black horse was a pair of balances. And it was injustice. There was total injustice at that period. And they taxed like you wouldn't believe. And Caracalla was a tax madman. He taxed anything. He said if you were standing still, you'd be taxed for taking up space. Now what Caracalla did was he wanted to bring as much money in to pay for his luxurious lifestyle and to buy off his army. What he did, he said, you're all citizens of Rome. But those who lived out in the provinces, no, we don't live in Rome. He said, yes, you do. He said, I've now made the borders of the empire the city. So there's a quotation. He said, the frontiers of this empire are the limits of the city of Rome, so that it doesn't matter where you live in the Roman Empire, I'm going to tax you because you are a citizen of Rome. So when you therefore look at the Apocalypse and look at this particular verse, when it says the great city, which is Rome, we're talking about the Roman Empire, the whole area of Europe that Rome occupied. Therefore, the dead bodies that lay in not the street, but they lay in the broad place, the plateau. So France was a broad street, a plateau, in this empire or in this large area of Europe. In fact, France was Papal Rome's special protector and principal thoroughfare of the great city spiritually called Babylon. And France was the eldest son of the church. It were the Franks were the first ones to adopt Catholicism. So when it says the great city, Rome, we're talking about the whole area of Europe, and in this great city, as Caracalla had pinpointed the borders, there is a large thoroughfare, not just a little lane, not just a little street. France was a large area that embraced, supported, and carried on the spirit of Catholicism. Now Rome, it says here that the great city would be Rome. That's why when you read verse 13, the answer is there for us, because in verse 13 of this chapter, chapter 11, it says this, and the same hour there was a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. The great earthquake was the French Revolution. So can you see how that fits? The 10th part of Europe the borders of which Caracalla said is Rome, the 10th part. Well, there are your 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's image. There are the 10 horns of the beast of Revelation 17. This was the Europe with which was broken up into 10 barbaric areas, and one of them was the Franks. So here we have a 10th part of those 10 parts of Europe that falls. What a remarkable thing. The 10th part of the city fell, which was France. Now, when these witnesses were slain in the broad plateau of the great city, this broad plateau which was France, the record then goes on to say that they would lay in the street for 3.5 days. Where they were killed was where they would come back to life again. They were slain in France. They would come back to life in France. So their coming back to life would be the great shaking of the people. It would be the French Revolution. It would be the second great earthquake of the apocalypse. But the record says their bodies would lay in the street for 3.5 days. The 3.5 days was literally, historically, 105 years. Now, how do we get 3.5 days equating to 105 years? Because when the Edict of Nantes was revoked and the political death where they had 15 days to get out of France if they didn't get converted to Catholicism, said Louis XIV, when that happened, they were politically gagged, no longer able to speak out, and they remained silent, these witnesses, silent until the French Revolution when they stood on their feet, which was 1789. It was a period, literally, of 105 years. How do we get 3.5 days equaling 105 years on the day for a year principle in the apocalypse? This is a challenging time period. Can it be reconciled? Absolutely. This is how we come to look at the 105 years coming from 3.5 days. Now these witnesses, the death of these witnesses, they would die politically, unable anymore to speak out. They were gagged by Louis XIV. 3.5 days later, they were raised politically. They became a political entity. Of course they did. They kicked out the aristocracy and they gagged the papacy. So they would politically rise with a great voice in the French Revolution. Now 3.5 days, we say, equals 105 years. The bodies remained in a state of non-decay. So this is what John sees. He sees these bodies laying in the street. And people are sort of walking all around the place in France and they can see the dead bodies. They remained there. They weren't picked to pieces by birds. They weren't ravaged by beasts. They stayed there, pristine, if I can call the dead body pristine, but they stayed there and everyone walked by and they could still see them. They were still in existence, ready to come back to life again. Now we know in the apocalypse, in some of the time periods that we've looked at, like 5 months with the locusts, 1,260 days with the witnesses, a day for a year. We know that through the apocalypse, a day for a year is the principle. But if in this case we applied the direct day for a year principle, it would mean that the bodies would have to remain in the street for 105 days. So we should read, and the dead bodies remained in the street for 105 days, and after 105 days, the bodies came back to life again. But there is a thing in the apocalypse called the decorum of the symbol. And the decorum of the symbol means that God squeezes, he reduces zip files for those people who are into technology. God just zips and zips a time period and says that is appropriate decorum. You can't have bodies laying in the street for 105 days and still be seen in the same state that they were when they went down. It would not fit the decorum. Let's come back to Revelation chapter 8 and verse 1, just to show you what the decorum of the symbol means. Like we have beasts that roam, and they roam for 1,260 days. You can have a beast that's alive for 3.5 years literally. That fits a decorum. You can't have a beast running around for 1,260 years. It doesn't fit the decorum. Now when you have a look at Revelation chapter 8 and verse 1, here's a classic example. When he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about the space of a half an hour. Revelation 8 verse 1 shows us the end of the 6th seal, which was the great earthquake when paganism was removed, taken from Revelation chapter 6. And then what happened is Constantine came in and there was a time of tranquility and peace. So John says, I saw in the political heavens silence for about the space of a half an hour. This half an hour here was 14 years. It was the period from the time Constantine came in and took the whole empire in AD 324 until Constantine died in AD 337. So 324 through to AD 337, there was political stability. All the time leading up to Constantine, there was war in heaven, Revelation 12. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, that old serpent, the devil, and Constantine fought against paganism until finally Constantine overthrew paganism. And then in 324 AD, there was political tranquility until Constantine died in 337. And then there was chaos back again. 14 years. Now the record says there was silence in heaven for about the space of a half an hour. You couldn't have John standing there and listening for half an hour. Well, you couldn't have John standing there listening for 14 days. 14 days, 14 years. So there is this thing called the decorum of the symbol. But whenever you read there was an earthquake for an hour, for instance in Revelation chapter 11, it's 30 years. There's a decorum. 1 hour is a 12th of a day. 1 month is a 12th of a year. Let's just flick back to Revelation 11 and see that 1 hour of the earthquake, just to show you how God uses a decorum. Verse 13 of Revelation 11, the same hour there was a great earthquake. And so with the French Revolution and the events that followed, God says it would be an hour. You can have an earthquake for an hour and the aftershocks. This is a period of 30 years. Day for a year principle. 1 hour is a 12th of a day. 1 month is a 12th of a year. There are 30 days in a month. 30 days equals 30 years. Do you see what God's doing? He says, I put down there things that match a decorum. So here we have these dead bodies laying in the street for 3.5 days. How do we reconcile it to fit the historical? Because there is no doubt from the time the Edict of Nantes was revoked until the French Revolution, those dead bodies were laying there. This is how we reconcile. The decorum of the symbol requires another solution. These days are lunar days. And what that means is this. We have our Earth, and our Earth revolves on its axis once every 24 hours. We have a moon. Now, of course, the moon is a symbol of ecclesiastical powers. But we've got the Earth that revolves on its axis every 24 hours. We've got the moon, and the moon does not revolve on its axis, but rather the moon revolves around the Earth once every 30 days. So here's the moon. Around the Earth it goes. Once there's 30 days. That's a lunar day. It goes around the Earth again. That's 60 days. 2 lunar days. It goes around the Earth the third time. That's 90 days. It goes around the Earth a half a day, which is 15. That is 105 of our days, which is 105 years. That fits the decorum. God could not say, and he doesn't. There are a number of passages in the Apocalypse. He does not just use the straight day for a year. He says it doesn't fit the decorum. You can't have an earthquake for 30 days or 30 years or a month. 1 lunar day is 30 of our days. 3.5 lunar days, or revolvings of the moon around the Earth, multiplied by 30 is 105 days, and 105 days is 105 years. Exactly from the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, when the witnesses were gagged politically, and then they would remain in that state until they would stand on their feet, exactly 105 years later. Now I want to show you something with respect to history. Have a look at this. Here is Belloc in the French Revolution, the book The French Revolution, page 231. He says this. He says, the Huguenots who were slain in 1685 and ceased to witness, they were told to get out of France, and they remained there for 105 years, this historian says, who wasn't reading the Apocalypse, he says, though no longer permitted to exist as a state within a state, remained for the 100 years between the revocation of the Edict of Nantes there and the outbreak of the French Revolution, a powerful and ever watchful body. You could see their dead bodies. They hadn't corrupted. That's the point. That's why God says they didn't corrupt. You could still see them. They were a powerful, ever watchful body, but they were gagged. It wasn't until the French Revolution came that they stood on their feet, a mighty army.